Makonnen Sankofa. Welcome to Spectacular Soul. Did I say your name right?
Yeah, she said it. Said it right. Thank you very much for having me, Lady Empress.
Okay. Well, I think the first thing we need to talk about is your name.
Okay, so
Makonnen Sankofa. See, I can say it.
Makonnen Sankofa.
Tell us about your name.
Okay, so my name, Makonnen, it can be pronounced Makonnen or Makonnen. It is taken from the name that Haile Selassie had before he was Emperor of Ethiopia. He was known as Rastafari Makonnen. Myself being a Rastafarian, I decided to adopt that name, and I took on the name Makonnen. So that's where that's come from. So it's really an Ethiopian name.
Okay.
Yeah, and in terms of the name Sankofa, which is my surname,
right?
Sankofa, that is from the from Ghana, from the Akan Ashanti people, and what Sankofa means is to go back, study history, and find your roots, and to use what you've learned to go forward and prosper in the future.
Okay, well I've learned quite a few things there just through your name, and because I know you, but I don't really know you. So number one, I didn't know you were a Rastafarian, and that's my ignorance because you don't wear locks, right?
No.
So I'm gonna be honest with you. I always knew you was affiliated to some sort of African doctrine, purely by how you carry yourself, right?
Yeah.
But I had no clue that you were a Rastafarian, so I've learned something here today.
Yeah, you probably don't remember when I had I used to have dreadlocks when I first come to Luton, but not anymore.
Did you used to cover them?
Yeah, I used to have a hat on, tam hat, but I don't think them times there I saw you as often as now. Yeah.
Alright, so I didn't realise you were a Rastafarian. Okay, continue. Tell us, why are you here today?
So I'm really here today to promote my book, The Rise of Rastafari, and speak about that. And let's just start by one of the interesting things you just mentioned, for example, which is, I said, the dreadlocks, because that's something that obviously a lot of people associate with Rastafari as probably one of the first visible things that they think about. Well, even that within itself is down to a bit of a lack of education, because it is a lot of Rastafarians do wear dreadlocks, probably most of them. However, it's not something which is one of the core basis or tenets of the movement. Okay. So just how you have, say, for example, like Muslims who wear hijab, and you have some who don't wear it. Right. Yeah, but it doesn't make a difference whether how devout they're not, whether they have it or not.
Why did you cut your locks off?
So I cut my locks off myself because, kind of what I said before, I didn't feel for me it defined who I was. Okay. And in terms of like the philosophy that I come from, Rastafari, following Leonard Howell, who's one of the first founders of the Rastafari movement, all the early founders of the Rastafari movement, none of them had dreadlocks. Yeah. So the dreadlocks didn't really come into about the 50s, when the Rastafarians started emulating the Kenyans who were fighting the British to get independence. And then certain Rastas also use it through the biblical interpretation. Right. So however, at that point, I felt that it's not something that made me the person who I was. And so that's part of the reason why I did it.
Okay. I think that I haven't read your book, and I like the title of it, The Rise of Rastafari, without telling anyone my age. When I was growing up, and I say this to my husband all the time, who wasn't born in this country, Rastas were so prevalent and visible, right? Especially in West London. There was a part of West London, Acton, where practically every other African person you saw on the road was a Rasta, right? And part of the culture, part of the music, you go to carnival, there'd be Rastas everywhere. And I have to say, as the older I get, I don't see Rastafarianism as rising, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yes, no, exactly. And this is one of the things that I want to tackle in the book. And it's ironic you said that, because I feel exactly the same way. That, for example, the younger generation, and I say myself 28, I'll say your second gen, and then your parent or my grandparent would be the first gen that came from the Windrush. So, like the people your age, second generation, they caught more of the vision of Rastafari, right? I think there's many reasons for, like, the young people. I don't come into it now. However, there is a contrast. When I went to Gambia recently, I've been twice in the last 6 months, and I've been to Jamaica as well, about 2 years ago. And Rastafari is popular amongst young people there, so it's not in England. Okay. And I think
Why
part of the
is that?
reason there's various reasons. I think part of the reason is just like you said, for example, the we was talking about earlier, say like the dreadlocks, the main concepts of Rastafari, which people associate with it, don't attract young people, and the reason it be because people don't have a proper understanding of what Rastafari is, and that's why I wrote this book, so people have an understanding what it is. People might not necessarily see it as associate it as understand the origins of it or how much of a African centered spirituality movement it is. Wow. So what might appeal to young people or what their image might just be, oh, I've got dreadlocks, I'm a vegetarian, I smoke ganja. So the things...
I'm going to stop you because you've just said ganja, you've just mentioned ganja, you've just mentioned the hair, and you've just mentioned veganism or vegetarianism. All these things are trending at the moment, right? Yeah. They're all quite fashionable.
But that's the thing, you can do it without being a Rasta. So this is why it doesn't appeal. Someone can just have, how many people just have got dreadlocks, but they don't associate with it? People can just smoke ganja, and they don't have to be Rasta, or people just be vegetarianism. So even these things that might be popular, like you're saying at the moment, people can still do it and not be a Rasta. Right. So what is appealing you? What is that theology that's attracting a young person to join it? So because they don't understand and know, for example, the core foundation of the Rastafari movement and what it stands for, it doesn't speak to young people. It doesn't speak to their problems which they've got now, and I think that's down to, again, a lack of knowledge on what Rastafari is. And a big part of this book is explaining exactly what is Rastafari.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how long have you been a Rasta?
I would say I started studying into it probably when I was about 19. Okay. Yeah, and I would say that I really fully came into it when I was probably about 21. Okay. Yeah. I think I'd always kind of had like as someone who's very African centered in my outlook, I think I'd already had kind of some kind of admiration for it. I didn't know a lot about it until I was 19. Okay. And then I started studying and like by looking at books, documentaries, speaking to people about it, going to events, and then the more knowledge that I took into was the more that I got into it, and I felt to myself, well, I agree with the philosophies and the principles behind the Rastafari movement, and that's part of the reason why I decided to come into it.
So do you have a lot of friends around your age that follow Rastafarianism? No.
As I said before, young people today, particularly in England, it's not as popular as it was in the older gen, as it was, say, people your age, the second gen. Yeah. So the majority of people I know probably are Rastafarians. They're normally elders. Okay.
Do you find that frustrating?
I do, but I think that just goes not just Rastafari. I think the black people, the conscious community, or black people in consciousness in general, it seems to be elder people. Even when it's just not Rastafari. When I go to general events in the community, I seem to see people that are more your age group and above, rather than people that are like my age group. So I think Rastafari has kind of followed the consciousness, just how you were saying that when you was growing up, for example, like you saw Rastafarians everywhere, so predominant, and so would have been obviously black consciousness, whereas obviously now, as Rastafari has really gone down, so to speak, in terms of its following, or of how it's appealed to young people, so has like the consciousness within the community.
That's so true.
So I think there's a parallel between the two, and I think the part of the reason why I wrote this book is really to raise, to uplift, to bring people back. And I think one of the core elements of what we need to do for Rastafari to appeal to young people again is they need to understand the doctrine, the principles, where it started, why it was important. Because this book, you don't have to be a Rasta to read it. It's a book for all people of African heritage, and the contributions that Rastafari has made over since it began really in the 1930s. When you talk about let's just say reggae music, creating influencing the whole genre of music into what it is today.
Right.
If it wasn't for Rasta, Jamaica wouldn't be known like how Jamaica is known today. Because a lot of people associate Jamaica and Rasta culture, even though Rastas have been heavily persecuted in Jamaica. It's where the Rasta movement began, but there's always been a divide between Jamaican people and Jamaican Rastafarians.
Right.
So it's been, but the main culture that's pushed out, certainly in the mainstream, is a lot of, for example, the Rasta imagery or culture. If you look at, for example, what it meant, for example, in like growing up in your age, see, for example, in the 70s in England, a force to be reckoned with. Even if you go to Africa and when the Zimbabweans were fighting to get independence, and it was inspired by the music of Bob Marley,
right.
And in obviously Jamaica, what it meant at the time, and what was a key element of the Rastafari movement is it gave African people a sense of spirituality,
right.
Where we could look in our own image. We're talking about Jamaica in the 1930s, 1940s. When what a lot of the imagery of what they had in terms of their idols or their gods were looking at either a Jesus, a blonde-haired, blue-haired god,
right.
or they were looking at someone like King George, who would have been, because Jamaica was still under British colonial rule.
That's right.
So in a lot of people's households, you would have had these two imagery in a lot of African people's households. So what Rastafari did when Marcus Garvey, who's a prophet in the movement, said that we as African people, we've got to look at ourselves. If we're going to deify anyone, we have to look within our own image.
Right.
And then when Leonard Howell, one of the founders of the Rastafari movement, took on the baton and declared Haile Selassie as the man we should look towards, they was really saying that, look, if we look at this man, it's an African king. We have to worship or idolize someone who looks like us in our image, and that's very much important for our understanding of self.
So can we talk about Africa? Because you mentioned earlier that you've been to Gambia twice in the past 6 months.
Yes.
So the first time you went to Gambia was 6 months ago.
It was in December.
Okay.
I went for a week. Had a really, really good time there.
Clearly, because you went back again.
Went back again. So my experience in Gambia was my first time actually going to an African country.
Right.
I felt at home as soon as I got off the plane. I mean, obviously being a
because I've heard that before, right? So can you explain that to me? So you got off the plane and you just felt that...
I felt like I belonged here. Like,
why?
It's just a feeling that I had within my body.
Okay.
So it's something that, being a Pan-Africanist and a Rastafarian, something that obviously throughout the last 6-7 years, for example, I talked about Africa, I read about it.
Right.
A lot of my life is obviously based around it. So I dreamed about going to Africa. So then obviously
dreamt about going to Africa. No, I'm not.
So, yes.
I think it's beautiful that you're saying this.
So obviously the whole one of the main principles of the Rastafari movement is to go back and to repatriate to Africa,
right.
And that's a core principle. So it's following the theology that I believe as well. So when obviously going to Africa and experiencing it, what it was, it just as soon as I got off the plane, even like the friendliness of the people, just the feeling that I got inside me, that sense of satisfaction that at least I was there.
So when you got off the plane in Jamaica, because you mentioned that you've been to Jamaica previously, you never had that feeling?
No, my feeling, and not Jamaica, and I don't want to dwell too much just on my initial, but the whole journey really. When I've been in Jamaica 2 years ago, however, I didn't explore as much as I did when I went to Gambia. So most of my experience, to be fair, was mainly around in Jamaica. Was mainly in the hotel, and there was 1 or 2 days we went to see family.
Okay.
But I've been in Jamaica, but when I was little, but I can't really look at that as an experience. I did a lot more exploring in Gambia, to be fair, than I did in Jamaica. But even just when I was in Jamaica in general, I just didn't get the same feel. Even when I was around the hotel in Gambia, and just literally walking on the street, mingling with people, anything, I didn't get the same feeling when I was in Jamaica. I think Gambia, the people there are very friendly. They do have speaking to a lot of young people and reasoning them, they do have a very a lot of young people have a Pan-African, or they've adopted some parts of Rastafari, whether it's the culture or the theology, which I thought was interesting, as I was speaking about earlier, because we're saying the opposite about young people in England, whereas over there, for example, there was a lot of young people that I was able to reason about Rastafari and Pan-Africanism, and some people say it's like a mini Jamaica because you go there, it's like
really?
it's like reggae music. It's like they're almost more into the culture than it's Jamaica. Because when I went there, I went to some parties when I went to Jamaica a couple of times. It's like they're playing a lot more of the conscious reggae roots and culture music over there. Reggae night by the beach and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
More just when you go to a restaurant than when you go to Jamaica. You go to Jamaica, they're playing American music or American hip hop.
That's interesting, actually. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's very much even like the people selling stuff. A lot of stuff you see like the red, gold, and green, or the tam hats and other kind of stuff. So it's it's very much influenced by the Rasta culture in Jamaican. Even though the majority of the people in Gambia are Muslims.
That's
yes,
right.
yes, but there is definitely element of the Rasta culture elements that people there have adapted.
So you definitely feel at home in Gambia.
Yes, yes.
So what's your plans?
So my plans there, I'm looking to go to Gambia for at least 6 months in July, while I'm going.
July this year?
Yes, July this year, so it'll be in a couple of months' time.
Yeah.
I went back in February, and again I had it's just as good a time as the first time, if not better.
Right.
I think when I went back in February, it was important because I went to a lot more of the village and the raw everyday places. 'Cause I wanted to find what it's like for everyday Gambians. And the first trip, I did venture out and explore, but it wasn't as I still went to cultural places and stuff, and I did the Kunta Kinte Island, and another places. But the second trip was definitely more going out into the villages, the compounds, seeing what Gambian accommodation was like, and mingling a lot more with just the everyday Gambians.
You're serious, aren't you?
Yes, definitely.
No, it's you know what it's a breath of fresh air, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this to kind of what's the word? I'm not saying it because you're younger, but you know we keep talking about the age thing, and as you say, and it's making me realise it. There are very few people that I know your age that are talking and living how you're living, and
this is the beauty of, and this is again the beauty of Rastafari, which is my influence, because I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for Rastafari, and this is the aspect of Rastafari that I'm giving testimony that people don't often associate. Like if young people heard this would probably appeal to them. Someone 28 doing what I'm doing, going to Gambia looking to set up business, doing this, that and the other. And I'm a very skilled person as well.
Okay,
I've got a degree in journalism. I'm one of the best salespeople in the country for Virgin Media. I've got multiple different talents, but the imagery that's pushed of Rastafari is, as I said before, is completely something different, and what that imagery which is pushed of the culture is not something that appeals to them in a way which is going to uplift us as African people.
Right. It's refreshing. It's a beautiful thing. So you're going back to Gambia in July for at least 6 months.
Yes. So that would be more to just see what it's. Obviously, I made a decision when I went to Gambia the first 2 times. I did look at obviously business opportunities. I wasn't just going back to Africa just to have a good
long
time.
holiday.
Holiday, yeah. So it was obviously going back to partly to connect to my roots culture, and it was also going there to see what kind of opportunities there were in Africa.
Are there a lot of opportunities in Africa?
I think there is for business in Gambia. I wouldn't say in terms of like working for someone, being employed there, and the income is very, very low. Yeah, because so you're talking about something like £30 a month. Yeah, it's a Gambian wage. So the benefit we've got coming from the diaspora is that the pound is very, very strong. So even, for example, if you don't have a lot of money, it can go far in Gambia when you do the transfer to the currency.
Yeah.
So that's benefit. I mean, I'm talking about when I look there, I get in a mini mart shop, and that was like £1,000 a year to get a mini mart shop the size of Tesco's. So
you're joking.
yeah. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about, transferring the currency. But so obviously in Gambia, that's obviously a lot of money because their wages wages different, and it's different also in Gambia because they don't have a lot of places. People live in the villages, in the compounds with the family, so they don't have all the water bills, electricity bills, rent. All of this, which we have to pay there.
Right.
So a lot of places might not have running water, or they don't have the electricity bills and
I
all
bet
that.
people are happy, right?
Well, yeah, I think
what they've got.
I saw people being very, very happy with what they got. Obviously, the propaganda that we've had of a lot of African, of what Africa, what Gambia is really not true. Because when I went there, I mean, I see people in England homeless, and I see people in England that are in, whenever I go into every single town in England, and I see them that look like they're worse off than people that I see in Gambia. And these people look really dirty, smelly, and that's English people that I see. And even people in England, for example, people that have got money or that in high positions, you see them, they're not happy. We still have to work 9 to 5. The majority of us, at least 5, 6 days, some of us 7 days a week. So the amount that we work, for example, we're literally just working, going back home, and then
it's crazy, because not that we're that old, but as you get older, you do think about, well, when do I stop working? And because I've always said I don't want to die in this country, right? That's just me personally, and I know my husband definitely does not want to die in this country. But then, because our parents were from the West Indies, you automatically think, well, maybe we should. But now you're put in a whole different, and we know of people, don't we, that have gone to Africa, Gambia, Ghana, and they're living really, really well.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong if you want to go to West Indies. I think we need to go anywhere where we as African people, where the majority of the population. For various reasons. One, even for like stuff like, I know you've got children, for self-pride and self-esteem. If I was to have children, I would want them growing up in a country where I feel the sky's the limit. And in Gambia or in African or Caribbean country, you can get a sense of just being there that the sky is the limit now. Because when you look at people, obviously, like I said earlier, you're looking at like a reflection of yourself in terms of. So in England, if you look at positions of power, we've never had a black prime minister.
No, we probably never will.
A black person running the military, running. Even if you go to the high street, you don't see black businesses in Luton. So in every area, we don't really have any power in England. So we need to. This is why I think it's important to go back to. One, to also just see people that looks like you. How can you have how can you give a child or teach somebody? This is why young people don't have a lot of self-esteem, because they don't see people that like themselves in these kinds of positions of power or doing things in this, or whether it's, for example, large scale businesses, whether it's mayor, prime minister, whether it's running the military, just running the country. In Africa, completely different, because the black people there are doing that. In the Caribbean, you're seeing your own people run it. So then you aspire and you say, well, I've got a role model then to look up to, and it's like, well, that's what I aspire to, and there's that aspect. So I think that's very, very important. Also, there's an element, I think, with Africa where we are going back or going forward to where we belong, because obviously we know we were taken out of Africa and brought to the Caribbean, and that really, I said, that interrupted our history. So what we're already saying is that we want to go back to Africa to help it advance, and help it to advance, which it would have advanced a lot further had we not been interrupted at that part of the history. And I think there's a kind of responsibility for every African person to really to contribute in Africa in some respect. Us in the diaspora, we are in some ways fortunate that we've had been able to get maybe educated in certain areas of university, or acquire certain skills in jobs and roles we've done. So these skills we can take to Africa, and they can really, really help to develop Africa and help to move some of the countries forward.
Which you're planning to do, which is a beautiful thing. So when is the book going to be released?
So the book is going to be released this upcoming Saturday. I've got a book launch in Luton and London over the weekend. One on Saturday the 18th of May, one on Saturday the 19th of May. I'll start with the one in Luton, as we are in Luton.
As we're in Luton,
It'll be hosted by Simply D's Events. It is the Luton African Books, Art and Craft Festival. That will be Saturday the 18th of May. That's this Saturday, between 1 to 6. It will be at the Luton Sixth Form College, Bradgers Hill Road. That is Luton, LU2 7EW. And that will be an event full of exhibitors, authors, publishers, performers, workshops. There'll be a mini fashion show. There's going to be a barbecue.
And please mention that operative word.
Family Fun Day, yes.
And a
free entry.
Free.
No. I just want to be clear. It's free entry. Doesn't mean my book's free. Definitely not.
Yeah,
my
mate,
book.
of course not.
Sign copy of my book is £10. Just wanting to be clear. So
Yes.
I don't want you to just come in and think that everything's gonna be free.
So if we go to the Luton African Books Art and Craft Fair on this coming Saturday at the Sixth Form College, we can buy your book, yeah?
Yes, you can buy my book. Yeah.
And if we don't manage to make it, I'm going to try my hardest to be there on Saturday. Will the book be on Amazon?
Yes, it will be on Amazon. I'm working with my publisher to get on Amazon. I can't say whether it will be on Amazon for the Saturday, because Saturday I was planning to have that as a big launch.
No, but for the future.
But
right?
oh yeah, definitely. It's going to be on Amazon. It's going to be on Kindle. Okay, what I want to touch into now actually is a definition of what Rastafari is. Yeah, it's because I spoke about why I wanted to write the book, and I wanted to explain what Rastafari is, but I didn't actually say what it is.
Right.
So I would define Rastafari, or Rastafari can be defined as a Pan-African nationalist movement that is aimed at the uplift of African heritage people, spiritually, culturally, politically, and economically. So as Rastafarians, we would regard the Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie as either an idol, god, or the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, depending on your beliefs.
Okay.
The Rastafari philosophy is also based on the Pan-African teachings of Marcus Garvey, and Marcus Garvey taught us that we should be self-reliant, we should have unity amongst ourselves, we should put race first, and the main goal was to build a strong black nation in Africa, and that we should obviously go back to repatriate to Africa and acknowledge divinity within our own race, and that's where the Haile Selassie comes into in terms of spirituality.
You know what? I love the fact that you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk, because my issue with a lot of Pan-Africans and Rastafarians are, they talk about Africa and repatriating, but it's just talk, right?
But no one go there.
Yeah, right? They sing about it, they talk about it, and they don't even go there on holiday, let alone actually plan to live there.
Well, again, this goes down to the fact of we need to go back to the basic to what inspired the Rastafari movement, the Pan-African element. Again, because most Rastas come onto the culture, the dreadlocks, the vegetarian diet, the smoking of ganja, even to the extent that takes over more than the theology.
Right.
And remember, a lot of Rastafarians don't actually understand the theology of Rasta.
Right.
So if I mention, say, Leonard Howell, Robert Hines, Archibald Dunkley, and Joseph Nathaniel Hibbert, who are the founding fathers of the movement, even a lot of elders in Rastafari would not know who these people are.
Right.
Yeah. So that is a travesty within itself.
Right.
So
it's a fashion thing.
Yeah, it's a fashion thing, and also there's a lack of understanding that has come from the elders down, because the second gen Rastas that were like, say, your kind of age were different than the first generation Rastas in Jamaica in the 30s and the 40s. So like when we talk about the first generation Rastas, they were the principles I've mentioned, the philosophy, the foundation of what I've spoken about. That's what they were about, that's what they were preaching, that's what they were doing. Yeah. Whereas the second generation, they got caught up in the culture. So this is where the dreadlocks came in the 70s. This is where the first early Rastafarians were not vegetarians. So
really,
the smoking of ganja, where that comes from, for example, that was something. Obviously, a lot of people in general smoke ganja. It's not inherently attached to Rastafarianism.
See, I didn't know that.
So it was used as an economical base. So
you're saying that the original Rastas ate meat?
Yes. And Haile Selassie himself ate meat, and it's in his autobiography.
Wow.
And Haile Selassie didn't smoke ganja. In fact, the three most important person in the Rastafari movement,
right.
Marcus Garvey, who's the prophet,
right.
Haile Selassie, who's the king, god, a saviour, and then Leonard Howell, who was the most prominent founding member of the Rastafari movement.
Yeah.
No, all three of them didn't have dreadlocks.
True.
Were not vegetarians.
Wow.
And only Leonard Howell was the only one out of them that smoked ganja. So but these are core things. So this is what I need to say. The theology of Rastafari needs. This is why this well, it's not new. This is why the foundation of Rastafari really needs to be redressed. And I'm really here to make sure the legacy of people like Leonard Howe and the founding fathers of Rastafari is put out there in the mainstream, and that legacy is not forgotten, because Leonard Howe, he must be turning over in his grave right now when he sees what Rasta represents today.
Right. That's interesting. I've learned a lot today. So where did the vegetarianism come into it?
So the vegetarianism came into it because a lot of Rastafarians, they were persecuted in Jamaica.
Yes.
Because it was really a movement against not against this. They were trying to say that. Yeah, well, they were saying that obviously Jamaica was very much in the colonial period,
right,
where it was under British colonial rule, and prior to that, coming from slavery. So last 400 years in Jamaica, people being under British colonialism, and what Rastafari was doing is trying to say that we should go back to our African heritage and culture. So
right,
obviously during slavery and colonialism, our language, our religious perspective, spirituality, our culture, everything had been taken out of us, and we've been brainwashed into a Eurocentric mindset.
Right.
So what Rastafari was trying to do is saying that we need to look back in our traditions, heritage, culture, even names, and really reclaim and really Sankofa. So that's what Rastafari was trying to do. And even in the terms of the spirituality, like I mentioned earlier, when the image of Haile Selassie, how important that is, of seeing a black man who, at the time, Ethiopia was the only independent, it was the second independent country in Africa. Liberia was independent, but Liberia didn't have a monarchy because it was under, it previously been colonized by America.
Yeah.
So Haile Selassie was the only emperor of an independent country in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the only African country that's not been colonized. Now, the significance of what Haile Selassie represented when he became emperor of 1930s, and seeing obviously that the African in its highest level, and even the Queen of England had to bow down to Haile Selassie.
Right.
That was significant. In terms of the vegetarianism, that progressed later on, for example, as the Rastas were persecuted because they weren't worshipping a white Christ, so they weren't worshipping Jesus or King George, and they were kind of anti-system.
Okay.
So they were really persecuted by the people of Jamaica, largely by a lot of Christians.
Right.
Jamaica is a Christian country. Well, the majority of people in Jamaica are Christians. It's got the most churches per square mile than anywhere else in the world.
I thought Barbados did.
No, Jamaica.
Jamaica.
At
one point, do you know that Barbados had the most churches or most places of worship?
Yeah.
I read that somewhere.
By the way, it's got that on the second one, but it's got one of the highest murder rates in the world. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So
that's crazy, you know. So you're saying that Jamaica, per capita?
Yeah, per square mile.
Right, per square mile, has the most churches in the world, yet the murder rate...
It's one of the highest in the world.
That's crazy.
Exactly.
When you think about it.
Exactly, so that's
actually mad.
I don't want to go too much on the religion on this,
no.
but going back to my point,
right,
is that, so what people like Howell, Rastafari was trying to break people away from Christianity, because it was trying to show people how obviously the Bible had been used in slavery to enslave us by the slave masters, and scripture had been used, and also trying to get an African spirituality in us. And because of what what Rastas represented was against the norm,
right,
and we was trying to do for self and be independent. Leonard Howe, one of the founders of Rastafari, built 500 acres of land, which was the most self-sufficient community in Jamaica at the time.
Right.
And what Rasta represented didn't want to get involved in a lot of political affairs and that kind of stuff. They were outcasts and they were persecuted. Now, because of that persecution, a lot of Rastas had to live in secluded areas or areas in the hills.
So I see where this
in the gullies.
Okay.
Now, because of that living in secluded areas in the hills, they're growing their own food.
Right.
Yeah. So they're growing their own food. I mean, they're not killing animals, because obviously if you're gonna have to kill an animal with your bare hands, and it's not like now when you just go KFC and it's served onto you,
right,
they can have to kill it in hands. They're like, no, that's wrong. So they're growing their own food. Yeah, which is something you see in a lot of Africa. I saw in Gambia when you grow your own food, etc. So they're growing, for example, fruits, vegetables, and all the natural kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah? So then they start eating it because it's their own growth. So that's really how vegetarianism came in, and the concept as well is also it's like an economical concept of obviously growing your own food.
Right.
It was obviously based on their situation, and it was also saying to the system, no, we don't not need to go to your shops and buy from your food. We cannot grow our own food and eat it. And it's nature. Today, if someone's going to Tesco's and they're buying a vegetarian meal or pizza meal, they might as well buy the pizza, because it completely disregards that concept of it.
I hear you.
Of it. So that's where the vegetarianism came into it. And then obviously, as more people started to come live in urban areas and other parts, they just kind of followed on to what Rastas were doing it. But that's where vegetarianism comes from. Also, a lot of Rastas read the Bible, yeah? So they use the Old Testament and the Bible.
Right.
And in the Old Testament and the Bible, it says they follow the dietary laws of the Old Testament, which is to not eat meat, to not eat pork, and that's even the dreadlocks. The Nazarites who followed Jesus, they had dreadlocks. So there's Rastafari. There's validations of what things that happen later from like from a natural perspective, but then there's also a biblical perspective as well.
Okay. Makonnen, it's been a pleasure, you know. I've learned a lot. And I'm always open to learning, and yeah, it's great when people come on this show and they actually tell us stuff that we don't know. And I don't want you to tell us all about the book, because I want everyone to support you in this, right?
Yes, definitely.
I will definitely be buying a copy of this on Saturday. So remember, the book launch for this young man, Makonnen Sankofa, is taking place this coming Saturday, the 18th of May, from 1 o'clock to 6 p.m. at Luton Sixth Form College, which is on Bradgers Hill Road. I'm going to try and put the flyer for this on the Luton Urban Radio website if you want more information. It's a free event for all the family. You will be able to meet Makonnen Sankofa and buy his brand new book, The Rise of Rastafari. And just from him being here for a few minutes this afternoon, I've learned so much. So I'm looking forward to Saturday, and I'm wishing you all the best for the future. For your new upcoming African life. I'm jealous in a way. I am not jealous in a bad way. But when I was younger, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because when you get older, things become harder because you have more responsibilities, children, blah, 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 blah. And you become more indoctrinated into the system and whatever. So I think you're doing this at the right time.
Yeah, I think it's important now, me being 28, because I think a lot of people, when we go to Africa, it's like when they're, for example, you're or even older than your age.
Right.
Yeah. So they're going there to retire.
Right.
Whereas obviously when you're going there, as say for example, my age 28, you still got, for example, another 30, 40 years.
Right.
And you're going there, obviously young with bags of fresh energy. You're going there to look to do business, to do this, that, and the other. When you're a bit old, you're going there. You've lived your life just to settle. You've had your children. You've done all that kind of stuff. So when you're going young, you're going different. So the prime part of a life now is to go in Africa. I talk about obviously legacy. It's obviously
one of my favourite words, legacy.
Legacy, going to Africa, having obviously children or whether it's business, and then going really on the continent and setting up that legacy. That's obviously when you're 28 years old, for example. It's all about going to Africa and doing that and living a life in Africa that we was really deprived of through slavery.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And colonialism.
Well, respect to you for that, and I'm wishing you all the best. I'm going to keep in contact with you. And remember, if you want to purchase the book or meet the man himself, Makonnen Sankofa will be at his book launch this coming Saturday at Luton Sixth Form College. I'm going to put that flyer up on the website so you've got all the information. But thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Learned a lot today. A lot, and it's a beautiful thing.
And there's all that and more in the book, The Rise of Rastafari.
Yeah, there's even more knowledge in the book, so we're going to be supporting that book here on Luton Urban Radio. Thank you very much for coming in.